You are not my real family! The entire ballroom froze as my sister, still in her pristine white dress, pointed at me with pure venom in her eyes, like I was some stranger crashing her perfect life. My mother sobbed, my father clutched his chest, and somewhere in the chaos, I realized this wasn't just a wedding disaster. This was war. Before we jump into the madness, I've got a tiny favor to ask. If you enjoy crazy family drama, unexpected twists, and raw emotional moments, make sure to subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, and drop a comment letting me know which city you're watching from. It helps more than you realize. Alright, buckle up, because once you hear what happened at Emily's wedding, you're not going to be able to look away. Let me give you a bit of background so you'll understand why my sister's wedding blew our world apart. Emily is 25, and she's always been treated like the star of our family. When we were kids, if she threw a tantrum because she wanted something, like a brand new car at 16, she got it. Meanwhile, I was the older sibling who was expected to set a good example, which basically meant I got zero credit for all the hard work I did. If I made a small mistake, I'd get lectures about responsibility. Emily, on the other hand, would be praised for just barely scraping by. But the cracks in this favoritism started showing the day I realized my parents wouldn't even notice if I vanished from the dinner table. I remember peeking around corners just to see if they'd wonder where I was, but they hardly batted an eye. This dynamic never really changed. My dad, bless his heart, was kind of clueless about the tension. He was always too busy taking a walk or burying himself in the garage whenever drama went down. My mom, though, she doted on Emily like she was some rare diamond. They'd go shopping, get their nails done, talk about Emily's dreams of a fairy tale life, while I'd be left cleaning up after dinner or doing chores alone. It was frustrating, but I told myself, hey, that's life. It's not that bad. Of course, everything changed at Emily's wedding, but to understand the full scope, you need to know about this weird rivalry that brewed between me and Emily, something that had simmered under the surface for years. Whenever I achieved something, she'd casually one-up me. If I aced a test, she'd find a way to top it with some flashy performance or achievement. It was petty, but we pretended to be cordial. I guess I thought this competitive streak was normal in siblings. Turns out, it was a ticking time bomb. When Emily announced she was getting married, I assumed I'd be part of the wedding party. Not because I'm an attention seeker, but because it's typical for siblings to be bridesmaids or at least have some official role. But no, Emily's bridal party was made up of random friends, her coworker from finance, and her fiancé's cousin's girlfriend. Me? Not included. It stung, but I tried not to take it personally. Still, it confirmed that Emily saw me as more competition than family. I recall standing in my kitchen staring at the invitation, half expecting someone to jump out and say, "Just kidding," any second. That gut punch of realizing I wasn't worthy enough for a formal spot sent me spiraling into self-doubt I hadn't felt since high school. Then came the seating fiasco. I arrived at the reception venue, grabbed my place card, and realized my name wasn't with my parents or other family members. It wasn't even in the main ballroom. Instead, I was assigned a tiny table in the hallway near the coat racks. At first, I literally laughed, thinking there had to be some mistake, but no, that was my designated seat. I confronted Emily about it. She brushed me off with a shrug and said they had to prioritize close family in the main room. I reminded her that I was, in fact, close family. My mom told me not to make a scene. Then Emily hit me with the line that changed everything. "You're not really immediate family anymore," she said, flipping her hair like it was no big deal. My jaw dropped. She explained that since I'd moved out and didn't visit every weekend, and since I wasn't married, she felt I was basically an outsider. Turns out, Emily's new mother-in-law, whom I'll call MIL, was also the type who loves stirring drama. She gave me this smug smile and said something like, "Only the most important people get the best spots." This was clearly a power move. Emily and Mill had formed an alliance of snarky pettiness, or so I thought. Little did Mill realize that Emily despised her. Emily had vented to me, and everyone else, countless times about how controlling Mill could be, how she hated Mill's fashion sense, how she didn't want Mill anywhere near her wedding speeches for fear of being overshadowed. The best part? Mill had no clue about Emily's true feelings. Emily was just putting on a sweet show, the same way she had done with me our whole lives. I had heard Emily's private rants so many times that I could practically recite them from memory, right down to her mocking impression of Mill's voice. It was like waiting for a volcano to erupt, knowing there was molten resentment bubbling just beneath the surface. I guess that's why, on that day, I lost it. I was fed up with Emily's double standards, the petty rivalry, and the blatant disrespect. So I decided to reveal the truth. I told Emil, right in front of Emily, "Oh, Emily was so worried you'd wear something tacky and make a show during the speeches." Emily's face went pale. Mill's smug grin vanished, replaced by icy fury. Suddenly, the room got tense. Before I knew it, Mill was demanding answers. Emily was sputtering denials, and my mother was caught somewhere between fainting and crying. The groom walked in looking like he'd just discovered a crime scene. Guests started whispering. The music screeched to a halt, and the tension was thicker than wedding cake frosting. I won't lie. Part of me felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. Here was Emily, the golden child, facing the consequences of her own lies. Our rivalry had escalated into a full-on showdown, right in the middle of her special day. But what came next was even more shocking. Just when Mill unleashed a tirade about how Emily was a spoiled brat and how she regretted spending a fortune on the wedding, Emily turned on me. "You've hated me since we were kids, haven't you?" she screamed, tears glistening. "You always wanted to outshine me." My mom started sobbing, insisting we both stop. My dad tried to break us apart, but Emily wouldn't have it. She lunged at me like she was ready to physically brawl, so heartbroken and furious that any sense of composure flew out the window. It felt surreal, like watching a soap opera unfold in slow motion, except I was actually in it, heart pounding, adrenaline rushing, everything else fading into the background. The hush in the room was deafening, and all I could think was how we'd never be able to go back to normal after this. That's when everything spiraled. Emily's meltdown was so extreme it scared me. She was heaving for breath, mascara running, shrieking about how I'd ruined her life. And in the midst of this chaos, Mill dropped another bomb. She didn't just suspect Emily's insincerity, she had receipts of texts where Emily bad-mouthed her. Suddenly, half the guests started huddling around, trying to see the drama unfold. At that moment, I remember thinking, this is it. We've reached the point of no return. Our rivalry has gone from petty sibling drama to an all-out war that could destroy our family in one night. Right when you think it can't get any worse, fate steps in. My dad, normally so calm, suddenly looked ghostly pale. He started swaying on his feet. My mom screamed his name. He grabbed onto a table and then collapsed. Pandemonium. People were yelling to call an ambulance. Someone was shouting for water. I was on my knees next to him, my heart hammering like it was about to burst. The paramedics arrived in a flash. We all were terrified he'd had a heart attack. Emily was sobbing uncontrollably. Mill looked genuinely scared. Everyone seemed to forget the wedding meltdown for a moment as we rushed to my dad's side. At that point, I felt a wave of crushing guilt wash over me, like every ounce of anger I'd held was overshadowed by the terror of losing our father. I remember looking over at Emily, and for a split second we shared the same horrified expression, silently blaming ourselves. At the hospital, we discovered he hadn't had a heart attack, but the stress had triggered something else, a temporary blackout that caused him to collapse and, more disturbingly, experience a partial loss of memory. The doctors said it might be psychological shock. He woke up and recognized my mom, but seemed hazy about why we were at the hospital. He kept asking if Emily was okay, if the wedding had gone well, if I had given a toast yet. My stomach twisted with guilt. "Dad, you don't remember what happened?" I asked quietly, tears choking my voice. He shook his head, confusion filling his eyes. "Last thing I recall is seeing you two girls fighting, but the rest is blank." My mom burst into tears, hugging him and whispering, "It's going to be okay. We'll get through this." Emily was in the corner, silent, her face swollen from crying. For the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. The rivalry was momentarily forgotten. The family drama, the wedding meltdown, they all paled in comparison to the terrifying possibility that we'd lost Dad to some mental break caused by our own stupid feud. Over the next few days, Dad's memory came back in pieces. He recalled bits of the wedding drama, but it was all fragmented. The doctor advised us to keep his environment calm and supportive so his mind could heal faster. That meant we all had to put aside our anger and be civil, for his sake. But once Dad was stable and home, the tension resurfaced like a toxic fog. My mom blamed me, claiming that my big reveal about Emily's secret trash talking was the final straw that pushed Dad over the edge. She cornered me in the hallway, her eyes red from days of crying. "You couldn't have waited until after the wedding to air your grievances? You had to do it there, in front of everyone, where your father could see." "Mom, Emily literally sat me outside the ballroom by the coats," I retorted. "She told me I wasn't immediate family. You let her. She was humiliating me, and you stood by doing nothing." "She was just stressed out." "Stress? Mom, for years I've been sidelined. You have no idea how it feels. And Dad, he's been oblivious." Tears welled up in my eyes. I never meant for him to get sick. I just couldn't stand being treated like I was nothing again. Meanwhile, Emily was going through her own crisis. Her groom felt betrayed by all the secrets. Mil demanded an apology, calling Emily an ungrateful brat. Emily avoided me completely, but one night she showed up at my apartment. I opened the door to see her standing there, clutching a tissue, eyes puffy. For a second, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked fragile in a way I'd never seen before. "Can we talk?" she whispered. I let her in, my heart pounding. We sat down and she stared at her hands. "I hate that it got this far," she said, voice trembling. "I never meant for Dad to get hurt. When he passed out, I realized how messed up everything was. You and we used to be okay, right?" The memory of our childhood flashed before my eyes, us playing in the backyard, riding bikes, giggling about cartoons. It felt like a lifetime ago. "We were," I answered softly, "but at some point you started seeing me as a rival, and honestly, maybe I saw you the same way." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I just felt like if I wasn't the best, nobody would love me. Mom put so much pressure on me, Dad was never around to intervene, and I know I did you wrong, Alex. But hearing you say all those things at the wedding, it made me feel like you'd been waiting to destroy me. I panicked." I looked down, guilt twisting my stomach. "I didn't want to destroy you, I just wanted you to see how I felt." "Is Dad going to be okay?" she asked, voice breaking. "I hope so, but you know we all need to apologize for what we did, especially to him." She nodded, fresh tears gliding down her face. "I'm sorry for everything, Alex." Hearing that almost broke me. I realized that for all the bitterness between us, we were still siblings, and maybe, just maybe, we could find a way out of this mess together. In that moment, I remembered how she once defended me in middle school, punching a bully who dared call me names. It dawned on me that under all the rivalry and bitterness, we still had a bond worth fighting for. In the weeks that followed, the wedding meltdown stayed a hot topic among our relatives. Some guests even took sides, blaming me or Emily. Dad's memory slowly returned. He eventually recalled the fight, though parts of it stayed fuzzy. As for Emily's marriage, the groom was furious at first, but when he saw how terrified she was about losing Dad and potentially destroying our entire family, he softened. Mill, on the other hand, wasn't so forgiving. She declared she'd never trust Emily again, basically disowning her in a fit of rage. That put enormous pressure on the new marriage. One evening, when Dad was feeling a bit stronger, we all sat down at the house. Mom, Dad, Emily, and me. The tension was thick, but I could see Dad needed closure. He looked us both in the eyes and said, "I love you girls. I don't want to see you fight anymore. I don't want to lose my memory again because of the stress." Emily burst into tears. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I was so caught up in being the best that I didn't realize how I was hurting you, Alex, and everyone else." Mom quietly apologized for enabling the favoritism. "I just wanted Emily to be happy, and I guess I forgot that Alex needed love too. I messed up." Dad glanced at me and I swallowed hard, tears blurring my vision. "I'm sorry I exploded at the wedding," I managed. "It wasn't the right time or place. I was just angry, and I felt invisible. But I never wanted to hurt you, Dad." In the silence that followed, I realized that maybe we'd all been waiting for an apology, but none of us knew how to start. Hearing my dad's gentle tone felt like a weight lifting off my chest, a sign that maybe we hadn't completely destroyed our family after all. We cried, we hugged, and for the first time in ages, I felt a glimmer of hope that our family could start fresh. The rivalry between me and Emily didn't vanish overnight, but we began talking, really talking. She admitted how jealous she'd been when I moved out and started a life of my own, free from the family drama. I admitted how resentful I felt about her always being the golden child. We promised to try to see each other as human beings, not competitors, and that, my friends, is how our family nearly imploded, but somehow managed to hold on by a thread. As for Emily's new mother-in-law, well, that's a story for another day. Let's just say Emily's going to have to work overtime to mend that relationship, if she even wants to.